They're two happy women bringing you inspiring stories, politics, pop culture, and lifestyle hacks, all with an eye to making our communities and our country a better place to live. It's the Happy Women Podcast with your hosts, Jen Horn and Katie Gorka.
Thanks for joining us and welcome to another episode of the Happy Women Podcast. I'm Jennifer Horn.
I'm Katie Gorka.
We have a lot to talk about today. We have the follow-up to the attempted assassination of President Trump. A lot of hearings on what went wrong, the failures. We could have a scandal when it comes to campaign financing. That's from James O'Keefe. And then, of course, guys, it is Olympic season. And so we have to understand, after that crazy opening ceremony, are you boycotting? Are you not? Where do you stand on the Olympics? Maybe just in general. I think it's an interesting conversation to have. But first, all sorts of, it's really interesting. I want to say there are all sorts of revelations coming out after we've been hearing now from the former Secret Service Director, Kimberly Cheadle. We've had a hearing now with the current acting director, Ronald Rowe. We've had testimony from Christopher Wray, who I believe is despicable. We could talk about that in a few more moments. But all we know about the assassination attempt on President Trump that left a man dead is that there were massive failures all the way around. And I don't know if we've come up with any real plans or explanations for this yet, Katie, but these hearings, I think, end up presenting more frustration and more questions than answering any questions or even trying to calm down some of those frustrations. It seems to just be getting worse.
Well, I'm going to say that the good news is I think the fact that both the Secret Service and the FBI seem to be doing everything in their power to cover their own butts and not to be held accountable is making both sides mad. I mean, I watched the hearing this morning and you could see the temperatures rising on Republicans and Democrats equally, which really surprised me. I really thought the Democrats would fully politicize this. In the previous hearing, if you remember, they really tried to make this about gun control. And not about the attempted assassination attempt.
And about heated rhetoric and all of that. Yes. I mean, always the games.
And domestic extremism, right?
Of course.
You didn't hear that so much today. Today, you really heard sort of equal counts of frustration. And the one that kind of surprised me the most was the Democrat senator from Connecticut, Richard Blumenthal, who is usually, from my perspective, one of the worst.
Wow.
But I have to say, I was cheering him on today because he said, one of the questions he asked was, when can we expect to hear the communications, right? We want the transcript of the communications that were going on by the Secret Service and communicating with the others. It's been 17 days. And the response was, we will get those to you. Right. I mean, how pathetic is that? It's been 17 days. You want to tell me those things haven't been transcribed yet? You know they have. There is no excuse for those not to have been sent over. And then he kind of concluded by saying, we need to know who was responsible for what. Who should have stopped President Trump from going out? Who should have been responsible for communicating with local law enforcement? Individual people need to be held accountable here. And he said, some people may even need to be fired.
Yes.
I say right on. I mean, I think he was really good for him.
And I think that we do need to address the failures. And, the big question is, and we've talked about this before, Katie, why was President Trump even let out of his vehicle? If they knew somebody suspicious was on the loose, if they had identified him, they knew he was there. We've known now from multiple agencies that they knew he was there and they were watching him and then they lost him. Why would you let the person you are responsible for protecting out of their vehicle? That cost someone a life. It cost some life-altering injuries to two others. And it was a huge attempt on President Trump, as we've said, but by the grace of God, he was turned and he wasn't hit where the intended target was. I think that there's also some questions, and I thought it was interesting to watch the testimony and really kind of see it in chunks. You saw the Secret Service first with Kimberly Cheadle. That testimony was disgraceful. She said nothing. Then you get Christopher Wray up there, the director of the FBI, who was willing to give you some information. We got more information from him than we've had in the past, but I think it's important to note the reason he's giving us that information is because this wasn't a hearing on the FBI. This was a hearing on another agency. So he was willing to give us all kinds of information. But where I say he's despicable is then he questions whether or not President Trump was actually hit with the bullet, which has been the narrative on the left, which was started by Michael Steele, not a doctor. Michael Steele, the former head of the Republican Party on the MSNBC, goes out there and says, well, I don't think he could be hit by an AR-15 bullet. There's no way he could be doing without your ear being blown off. Not a gun expert, not a doctor. And Christopher Wray played into that on purpose to fuel the speculation that President Trump was somehow lying about being struck by a bullet in an assassination attempt. And then the FBI, his own agency, has to come out and confirm that he was indeed struck by a bullet. Now you have Ronald Rowe, who we are learning was actually in charge of the operations of the Secret Service, probably had more of a hand in what went wrong than Kimberly Cheadle. He's now in charge of this agency, but the reason you're feeling like he's covering his own rear end is because that's exactly what he's doing to try to save his job. And then you've got local law enforcement who are just saying, hey, we didn't even have briefings with the Secret Service that we asked for. I mean, then you have to ask, was this just a very poorly run department? Or was this intentional sloppiness? And I think that's what we really have to get to the bottom of.
So one of the big stories that came out yesterday was the fact that approval for the snipers was not approved until the day before the event.
Yeah.
And Dan Bongino, former Secret Service, talked about this a lot. And he said, at an absolute minimum, you need 2 to 3 days notice because you have to go prepare. Ideally, you really have 5 days to a week. So the idea that this wasn't approved until the day before meant that they were not sufficiently prepared. Yeah. Now Susan Crabb is reporting that it was acting Secret Service Director Ronald Rowe who it was his decision to deny the counter sniper teams to any Trump event outside of driving distance from DC. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with him. Now, I just want to say one other thing that also really concerns me, and that is the whole notion of the threat from Iran.
Yeah.
So, I feel like, tell me if you're hearing different, but I just feel like it's not being talked about that much. And I want to say, okay, here's a weird thing, because I'm in Northern Virginia. You know that we have a lot of foreigners. We actually had someone come into our office yesterday. This is the Fairfax GOP, and tell us they had inside information on the threat from Iran. And so my intent, and there's nothing we can do about that. We said, you need to call the FBI, right? They're the ones that are going to deal with that. But my antenna really went up when I heard them in the hearing. One of the members of one of the senators said, tell us more. What, was there? We all know that there is a threat from Iran. It has been talked about. The Secret Service has talked about it. The FBI has talked about it. But was there something more specific? And they're really not coming up with details. But this is concerning. This is really concerning. If this is the level of competence that we're seeing, and we know that there is a credible threat from a foreign adversary, I worry about that.
I worry about it too. And this is where you kind of have to merge the timelines, right? And I know both of us, and the reason I love doing, well, there's many reasons why I love doing this podcast with you, but I always think it's fun to talk about conspiracies, but I don't like us to operate in conspiracy because I don't think it does our side of the aisle any favors. And I know you agree with that. And so, but if you operate in facts on this one, the fact is that the Secret Service knew about the credible threat from Iran on President Trump's life before this rally in Butler. So if you have someone who is suspicious and you have someone who's walking around with a rifle and they identified that, and you have sniper teams that are supposed to be in place, and then you find out that the sniper teams actually went because somebody locked themselves out or something like that. I mean, it was a combination of errors. You have to ask yourself, why wasn't that security tighter when there is a credible threat from a nation that would love to see Trump dead because his administration was actually tough on them? We also know that they've had credible threats that they're going to try to disrupt the election again, election interference from Iran. So these threats are there that they know about. You have to question why the security wasn't tighter, why they were not taking this more seriously, because I mean, I don't think Iran is somebody that you want to mess with. That being said, I also want to know what got a hold of this guy to make him pick up a gun and take it to Butler and go buy a ladder. I mean, we have to talk about this. I don't believe that people are radicalized out of nowhere. And I think, and I'm really interested in what you think about this from your national security background, because you may not have someone whispering in your ear, but you may find content that makes you operate in certain ways or takes you that extra step to push you in the direction of picking up a rifle and doing what this person did. And so was that something that he saw? Was that put up by a bad foreign actor? What was that catalyst for the guy? And I know they're talking about motivations, but I want to see the senators and the congressional representatives really digging into this. I think it's important to know what gets into the mind of these people. And I don't know if we're spending enough time digging into that. There's so many different things that they've revealed slowly but surely about encrypted text messaging. And then there's been rumors about money that was in this guy's account, and he was building explosives. And his parents knew he was building explosives. I mean, it's just, but they said that he was into science, so they weren't concerned about it. I mean, there's just very strange behaviors that were sort of passed off that I think we really need to dig into.
Well, and the senators on the hearing this morning made a really good point, because, you know, they were sort of critical, as we are, of the tendency to go into conspiracy theories. But the point they made was it's kind of hard to blame people when you refuse to give them concrete answers, right? You leave us with all these questions. And, you know, my first thought is when we talk about this notion of what might have radicalized this kid, you know, I immediately default to thinking they're never going to tell us. No. You know, they're going to keep it a secret because this is the culture that we're living now. It's a culture. And
you're not just making that up. That's a fact, because we haven't heard from many famous school shooters, which I liken this kid to. He has all the same characteristics. But I mean, think about it. We never get that answer. We never get what was the moment, what was the catalyst for the radicalization. We never get that from the government.
Yeah. Oh, and there was a whole scandal around the Nashville shooter, right?
The transgender shooter, right.
The manifesto was kept secret forever, and then somebody leaked it, you know, because the fact that this was a transgender kid, it would have gone against the left's narrative. So they wanted to keep it a secret. And I've really had it with, and I think many Americans have had it with this culture that is a lack of transparency and a lack of individual responsibility. And so, you know, I'm really confident that if President Trump wins, I think this is one of the things that he will really change. And I think, you know, we've got to get back to a place where when there is a failure in leadership, heads have to roll. People have to be held accountable. And the American people, who are ultimately the employers of these people, right? We are entitled to access to this information. I get some of it has to be protected for operational security and, you know, that kind of thing. But right now, they're keeping all of it secret. And it's wrong.
Well, this is our country, and we run the country, and we need to be trusted with the information and the truth, and not have it, you know, kind of pushed through a sieve by power-hungry bureaucrats. That's not what the country is about. We should be the stockholders in our country. And right now we are being protected for our own good. And I'm sick of it. And I think a lot of people are sick of it. And that is really, when people talk about dismantling the deep state, that is the biggest piece of it. Give us truth, give us transparency, trust us with it to make the best decision for our country moving forward. And that's not happening.
But I want to make one final point on this, and that is, don't ever sit around and wait for power to be returned to the people. Nobody voluntarily gives up power. The only way this is going to change is if we demand that it changes. You know, some of it's going to happen at the ballot box, but there are plenty of other things that we can be doing as well. And part of it is being outraged, letting them know our outrage. People need to be communicating with their members of Congress and saying, demand answers. This is not good. So I hope that more and more people will be up in arms and demand more from our leadership.
Absolutely. All right. Well, shifting gears to our next topic, James O'Keefe, who has done a lot of investigative work over the last decade or so, has a new piece that he's dropping, and it's caught a lot of attention. And it is really uncovering a scandal involving Act Blue, which is a Democrats' apparatus to collect campaign donations from voters. But he's uncovered that some pretty spectacular numbers, like a woman who apparently made 3,000 donations in 2022. You want to take us through this?
Sure. So this is a problem. This has been coming out a little bit. So just to give the background, I mean, one of the pieces of the narrative that the left is using to show that Kamala has widespread support is the fact that she allegedly raised $90 million in her first 2 days. And I think now it's up over $200 million. But we've got these growing number of stories coming out about malfeasance at Act Blue, which is the main Democrat fundraising tool. So one of these stories is James O'Keefe. He has identified, so you can find this information. You go onto the Federal Election Commission website, and I tell you what's interesting. There are a lot of citizen investigators out there chasing this stuff down. So God bless them, and go out and do the research yourself if you want to contribute to this. But James O'Keefe came out with a story, for example. So he's finding senior citizen donors that allegedly gave over $200,000 in contributions. So he found this one. This is a lady named Cindy. She's in Annapolis, Maryland. He found records that she had allegedly contributed over 1,000 times to Act Blue in 2022 for a total of basically $19,000. And he says that means she would have had to donate 3 times a day, every day for the entire year. When asked if she had donated this amount, she says, no, I don't think so. So, and it's interesting because here in Virginia, our Attorney General, Jason Mayaris, has said he is aware of these allegations and he is investigating. And I think there are other investigations going on. But it seems to me that what it's looking like and what's being alleged is that Act Blue has somehow come up with a way of putting hundreds and thousands of charges through people's credit cards, but then somehow paying these before they hit the bill, so people aren't actually seeing it. It'll be very interesting over the days and weeks ahead to see what more comes out with regard to this story.
Those automatic payments are pretty tricky. And if it's true, they're taking money out and then paying money back to tell a successful story about donations. That's really something to look into. That's some major problems. And it wouldn't surprise me, because I have felt that there was something funny about the Kamala Harris donations for sure in 2024. It's almost like something in me just tells me that they were withholding the amount of money to tell Joe Biden that his donations had dried up, to try to push him out of the race and encourage him to drop out, and then hold him back and then release him when Kamala Harris makes her announcement. And they did that for the debate as well. If you remember, the story after Biden's terrible debate performance was that he had made $42 million. Now, look, maybe he did, but I can't imagine that anybody would pay 42 cents for that debate performance, much less $42 million. Are you kidding? I mean, it's a tough story to sell, but that's exactly what they were trying to do to make it look like it was better than it was. So these are Democrat tactics that we've seen before, which is why you question where all this money is coming from.
Yeah, I think it's really concerning, and I hope that there is a thorough investigation and that we're able to get to the bottom of this.
All right, so on to the Olympics, and I have a feeling this is where we are going to part company here on our take on the Olympics. So before we jump into the current scandal, I just have to ask you your take of the Olympics in general, because I came from a family, I'm like a sports girl. I love baseball. I love hockey. I'm really getting into football. Like, I love professional sports. But when it comes to the Olympics, I don't know why. I don't know if it's the slow, kind of quiet commentators. Like, I just have always felt like the Olympics are sort of boring. But I also know I'm a minority. My routine when the Olympics are around is I always check the newspaper, because I am a patriot, for God's sake. And I want to make sure that the United States is in front, because I do root for Team USA. But I can't say I actually sit and watch any Olympic events, but I think that you're going to because both of your kids play in amazing sports that are celebrated in the Olympics. So tell me what you think.
No, I'm with you. I got to tell you.
You do? Oh my God, I love you. So you think they're boring too?
I've never been a sports watcher. I've always been a sports player, and I love to do sports. I was a college soccer player on the #1 team in the country. I played for UNC Chapel Hill, and I loved it. And I've always loved to engage in sports. I cannot bear to watch sports. None of it. None of it.
I thought for sure you would be a total Olympic girl. Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right. So we're on the same page. We don't like the Olympics. So that's
But
cool.
I will say this. Okay. So my son, who you know, just got engaged.
Yes.
His fiance was a top ranked national rower.
That is very cool.
Yeah. So she competed at Worlds for the US and was a really top rower. So I felt kind of a special allegiance to, swimmer. Did I say rower? No,
Swimmer.
My son
Yeah,
was a rower. She was a swimmer. She was a swimmer. And so I was kind of interested in some of the swimming races. And I was particularly interested in Katie Ledecky because she's from this, DMV area. I think she's actually from Maryland, but, she grew up in this area just a few minutes from here. So I did watch that race and it was absolutely stunning. I mean, I think she's incredible. I think this was if I'm not mistaken, the women's 800 meter freestyle. And she's 27 years old. She's the best female swimmer in the world. And I thought had a beautiful race, but she came in third behind two other swimmers that have come up through the ranks and are really outstripping everybody else. So it was a really exciting, amazing race. Okay. But aside from that, I don't watch.
I do want to say though, it's not that I don't respect the athletes. I do. I think it's incredibly awesome.
Incredible.
My cousins are twins and they were both competitive they were competitive trying to get onto the Olympic team actually, but they were huge with track and field. They started as swimmers. They went into track and field. One of the girls was the fastest runner in California when she was in high school. I mean, really incredible. And so I totally respect that dedication because I've seen their commitment. But yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's like watching paint dry for me. I was watching the fencers were on the other day and just with the helmet, like the beekeeper suit, I don't know. But anyway, so let's talk about the opening ceremony. It's just a lot. It's a lot to handle. The opening ceremony got a lot of controversy, and this was what looked to me, and I think looked to most of the world, like a depiction of Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper painting that featured drag performers. And there was a man dressed as a woman who, I'm going to say this as tamely as possible, revealed some of his nether regions. I think the cameras picked up on some of that. There was a depiction of the golden calf, obviously hugely symbolic for Christians. There was the pale horse that was depicted. And so I heard very mixed reviews about the opening ceremony, but people of faith particularly were really upset by this insult to Christianity. Now, the Olympics have since responded and they've said, no, this was about a pagan festival. This was not about the Last Supper, not our intention, but we know what they did. We know that it may have been their depiction of, of Greek mythology, but this definitely had definite correlations directly with the Last Supper painting by Leonardo da Vinci. So one of the coolest things that I saw was from Jillian Michaels, who was the coach on The Biggest Loser, who is gay. And she said something along the lines, and I'll paraphrase here, but she said, to my fellow gays, we're always upset when the extreme right comes after us and we're asking for tolerance for our lifestyle. But how in the name of tolerance can you insult 2 billion people on the planet who are Christians? This is not a way to unify people. This is not a way to sell people on your cause. This is simply going to divide people. And I think that's exactly what it's done. Katie, your thoughts on the opening ceremony?
I'm with you 100%. I think it was totally insulting. I think it was deliberate. I think this is, we are seeing enacted the culture war that we've all been living with and living through and complaining about all the time. So then the question to me becomes, do we boycott? And I'm going to say I really appreciate all the outrage, because apparently it did result in the French Olympic Committee taking down all video of the opening ceremony. So apparently, right, you can't find it. But I was really struck by a post from Riley Gaines, right, the incredible swimmer who has been so good and so outspoken against men competing in women's sports. She said this: I feel heartbroken for the Olympic athletes, many of which are friends, who trained their entire lives to compete on that stage, but will now have significantly fewer eyes watching and admiring because of the satanic, blasphemous display put on by the Olympic organizers.
Yeah.
That kind of made me sad. That kind of made me sad.
Well, and and the sad thing is, like, for me, and the reason I started with, do we watch the Olympics or not, is because I don't really watch. So my boycott probably doesn't matter to people. But I do think, I made this a topic on my radio show in Los Angeles on Monday, and I can't tell you how many people called in, and so many people were disgusted and turned off. And what makes me sad about this is I understand that they want the pageantry and they want all the eyes on the opening ceremony. But when did it become necessary for art to be something that is so edgy that it alienates all of us? Now, look, I know that is art and it's supposed to make us think, but this is about a celebration of athleticism. This is about a celebration of people who have literally dedicated their lives to be at the level to compete in the Olympics. And somehow we want to overshine that with all of this craziness. Why can't we just make this a celebration of the countries that are competing, make this a celebration of the athletes, and knock off all the stuff that divides people? I mean, again, I have an appreciation for art. I will stand with people to make art in whatever way they want, because I am a person who stands with freedom of speech. That's not my intent to say that it should be changed. But I just wish that the Olympic Committee would think about what this is really about. And it's not about drag queens at the Last Supper. It's about the people of the world that we just talked about, that have given up their life to be great swimmers, or have given up their life to be great fencers and wear the beekeeper outfit, whatever it is that they want to do. Let's celebrate them. And I just think it misses the mark. And I think they do just a bad job to alienate. And truly, I'm a little scared from a personal level, because in 4 years, I live in Los Angeles. The Olympics are coming. And you can only imagine when Los Angeles gets a hold of that opening ceremony, what might come out. Who knows? But I'm
going to say this. I think that the pushback has an impact.
I do too.
We've talked about this in the past, but, I'll talk about what I've seen in my little tiny microcosm here in my local community. We have this community center with a big budget that brought in a radical executive director who started doing crazy radical things. He had drag queen story hour for toddlers and Nicole Hannah-Jones talking about the 1619 project, and the community pushed back. He lost his job, and the person they brought in is much more of a centrist, and the politics, okay, not entirely gone. I still think everything is a little too much about diversity. But for the most part, the politics have gone out of it. And I'm just, I think it's really interesting. Okay. I think what I'm doing is I'm talking myself into a position of boycott, because I will say this, look, and it's not going to take away from the fact that those athletes are still going to get their gold medals. But I do not think that the French should be rewarded for doing what they did by having our viewership. And if we want this to change, and if we don't want the Olympics in 4 years to be a repeat of this, we need to send a very clear signal that this does not fly.
A strong message. And let me tell you something. It wasn't just about having drag performers in the opening ceremony. I guarantee you people would not have mentioned it if they had just been on stage dancing or performing. Yeah, people might have said, okay, really? But the fact that they have to set them at the table like the apostles, I mean, give me a break. I mean,
such a slap in the face. Yeah. Okay, but wait, but we cannot leave this topic without giving a nod to Celine Dion's incredible performance.
Oh my gosh.
Right?
This was the only thing that made me happy about the whole thing. So I don't know anything about Celine Dion's politics. I just was so sad and to be honest, I think she's got a beautiful voice, but I wasn't a mega Celine Dion fan, but I felt so terrible hearing about this condition that she had, what frozen person syndrome or something. I mean, it sounds absolutely horrific, and she has such an amazing voice, but to see her actually be able to sing and do what she did in the face of that illness, well done. And I've even heard that she's thinking about doing her residency again in Las Vegas, which I think that's incredible.
It is incredible. And I'm with you. Like, I was never a super big Celine Dion fan, which is not to say her songs won't make me cry if I listen to them in the right moment. Yeah. But I watched the documentary I find her compelling. And I watched the documentary that's recently come out about her, where she really talks very openly about this illness. And you can see how it has just taken her down. And the fact that she's been able to come back from that to sing, I just loved it. I thought it was really powerful and beautiful, and more power to her.
That was the best part of the whole thing for me. So I think we agree on that. And I guess to boycott or not to boycott the Olympics is the question. My answer. I'm boycotting. And it seems like maybe you've talked yourself into it too, but hey, you can let us know what you're thinking in the comments here. Make sure that you like the Happy Women podcast. We appreciate the 5-star reviews. Share it also with your friends. And if you want to connect in different ways on various platforms like YouTube or on Spotify, you can get all of the connections at thesalempodcastnetwork.com. Just look for Happy Women. And on that note, you'll find my favorite happy woman, Katie Gorka. She has a brand new book. It's called Next Gen Marxism. It's available wherever you get your books. If you haven't picked it up yet, do that. And you can follow her as well by searching her out on Facebook, Catherine Gorka, or connect at katiegorka.org. If you'd like to find me, you can find me at Jennifer Horn Radio on Facebook and Instagram, and Jennifer Horn on X and Truth. And we appreciate you for joining us for another edition of the Happy Women Podcast.